G'day, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 13 of Just Conversations, solution-focused communication with the goal of informing systemic change. As always, my next guest needs no introduction. Over to you, Ben.
My name is Ben Ulm. Professionally, I'm a TV producer, writer, director. Now going back 40 years, everything from silly reality shows to some really meaningful documentaries that try to initiate discussions about social change, or at least hold a mirror up to areas of our world that aren't quite getting there yet. I'm a dad, I'm a granddad. Dean and I met each other 4 or 5 years ago, I think, over a series of coffees talking about a particular project we were doing, and hey, we're still friends.
Yeah, I don't know. We just hit it off. One of those guys that we hit it off very well, and have remained in contact. And I enjoy always catching up with you, mate. And as you just touched on, so we met when you were producing a documentary 60 Days Out. Was it? What was it called again?
There had similarities to that. It was a show called a documentary series called Life on the Outside, and it was one of those what ifs. I mean, you look at the rate of recidivism with our corrections areas, our public propensity to chuck people into jail and leave them there, and then expect good outcomes. And so SBS was curious about a community program coming out of the United States, of all places, where instead of just chucking people on the street, or maybe the shirt on their back and the stigma of being behind bars, they match them up with families who have a spare room. So it's like a billeting situation. And so the families, without prejudice, go, yeah, you can have a room. And they had outstanding results from that in the States. It was a program of 20 contributing families, and they had a 100% success rate in terms of a non-returning to custody. I think it was a 1 year time frame. And then they escalated it, and then they did 120 families after that. So we said, well, I mean, it sounds like a good idea. What if we could do it here? So SBS said, well, there's a lot of issues around duty of care, and for both sides, actually, like what these ex-prisoners, or these formerly incarcerated people, as we like to call them, FIPs, they're going into homes they don't know, but they might be environments that aren't safe for them. So we had to do a lot of due diligence and a lot of research, and we spoke to any number of agencies just to do a proof of concept. Like, can we make a documentary here that replicates that idea? There's issues around camera crews and what you witness, and giving someone their space, and also just the mindset of someone who's been locked up for a period of time. It's they're vulnerable people. So that was a lot of consultation. I reckon we contacted between 70 and 100 agencies and groups that work in this area in Sydney and in Melbourne. Dean was, I think, you're probably one of the first we chatted to, and that was inspiring. And then we were on like Kong, and then of course COVID hit, so it stopped everything. And then we picked up the threads maybe a year and a half later, because we were determined, SBS was determined, and then on we went.
Yeah.
And the series Life on the Outside, I think it's still on SBS on demand. I'm pretty sure you can look it up.
Check it out if you can. Yeah, I think so. What I'm trying to get at the moment is, how do we introduce humane practices into these settings and environments, both incarcerated and non-incarcerated individuals, like through that transitional process. I think that's what I got from you guys when you were trying to do it. You were trying to really treat it with the gravitas that it deserved around, these are people getting out. What are some of the key sort of frictions that you were like, this is just insane? Like, what are we doing? And like coming up against systems and trying to negotiate through systems to other systems sort of scenarios.
Well, here's what we found. Now, I already had a relationship with New South Wales Corrections, because purely by coincidence, we were making another documentary series called Australia Behind Bars. So I can speak with a little bit of authority about life inside jail from the point of view of an observer, because we were in Dalwinia, we were in Wellington, and we had a lot of consultation with to have that sort of access. That's a starting point. When we started this feasibility, and we contacted so many so many groups, um, there was 100% buy-in and goodwill. From corrections
Yeah.
onwards, everyone said, "Hey, this sounds like an interesting idea." When it came to um, putting the rubber on the road and saying, "Right, can we point a camera at you and will you take part?" I would say almost everyone ran a mile, and it wasn't because I think the main reason for that was they were worried about their own standing in their own patch. They didn't want to witness a car. They didn't want to be a passenger to a car crash.
Yeah.
So, from corrections to, I'm not going to name too many of them, but they basically is like, we see some merit in this. It's interesting what's going on in that particular community in the United States, but we can't have our people on camera taking part in this experiment for the sake of television, because if it goes wrong, it's going to blow up in our faces. And as you know, Dean, like each of these groups has its own funding model, revenue sources, and a lot of that's reputational, and a lot of it's sort of accounting and being able to say, right, we put in this much money into this, and this happened.
Yeah.
And there's a fair bit of jiggery pokery around that, and there's money being thrown at a problem where we continually ask the same question and expect a different answer.
Yeah.
So when it came to SBS saying, right, we want this, let's go, we only had a handful of people who were prepared to take part. And my regret is that corrections didn't, because they're seen as part of the problem. The system is the problem. It's a much bigger problem than just one institution that's in charge of safely keeping people, for the incarcerated period that they're given by the justice system. But we're in a media cycle going back to turning the boats back, of throwing people, throw them into jail, throw away the key. It's a very competitive media environment. And so the public appetite to try something different is not there. And so the political will is not there. Even if at the grassroots, the frontline people are going, yeah, we've got to do something different. So to make this program, we struggle to find contributors. We struggle to get access to people who are coming to the end of their term. And so we could at least, ask them if they're willing to take part, give them some consultation, give them site checking, so that, we knew how to work with them, so we didn't put them in harm's way, or I didn't put my camera crews in harm's way. So the practical side, when it came to actually making this thing, it was a long, difficult series of setbacks. And ultimately, we had 4 participating men and women who had been behind bars, and 4 participating families. And I'm proud of what we did, and you were part of that, Dean, because the way that you spoke to that kid when he came out about, here's the things to watch out for. And in the context of the show, it was we had pretty good results. Like we jumped off at the 100-day mark rather than the 1-year mark. So what happened after that, we weren't really party to. But that was the big head against the wall, which was all the goodwill in the world. You meet a lot of really good people, and they genuinely want to help in this problem. And I'm talking about both sides, from government as well as from NGOs. But their patch, their existence relies on I guess being uncontroversial, not trying things differently, and the casualties, the population trying to get back on their feet when they, after they've made a mistake and they spent some time behind bars, because the public appetite is to throw people into jail rather than rehabilitate, or there's this level of humanity that you talk about. They end up in jail. Jail does to them what it does to them, which we all know. It's a reliable path to damaging someone, and they come out of jail, they can't get a job, their social standing is, they've got this stigma. What are you going to do? So there were times when I thought, we can't actually make this show, and it was frustrating, because there was a will to make this show. But I'm glad we did in the end.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did too, and I'm glad that I was involved in it. And I'll put my hand up too, because I was very reluctant to be. I remember having conversations with you about me appearing in the show. That was more about my vanity than anything, I think. So here we are with my own show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the things that I think it really did have the ability to highlight was that the difficult, like people think prison release is a really joyous experience, or that Hollywood concept. So the media sort of portrays, oh yeah, he's getting out and life's going to be great, sort of that whole thing. But then you look at sort of, you know, the Shawshank and a few other movies around the reality of what it's like of going from such a violent sort of environment to, you know, to just a normal like society, and you have to function up and you don't have the capacity to do that. A lot of people don't have the capacities to do that. And my experience was the person that I sort of helped the most into the environment or the household environment, like that guy that lived in that house that was willing to have him in there, he was so in for it. Like he was all in. He was like, I want to help this guy and I want to do that. So just the realities of what actually played out, like, you know, his inability to, you know, I think the guy that was staying in that house had to catch a bus 7 stops away and go and do all this sort of stuff.
Well, but here's the thing, right? He had to technically break curfew to get to
There you
the
go.
program that was there to help him, like because of where the accommodation was.
Yeah.
And that's a true jeopardy, right? It's like if I get there in time for
It's
them.
an hour and a half bus ride. I have to be there at this time. It's an hour and a half bus ride home, and I have to be home at this time. I can't get, like, I physically can't teleport myself to that spot at that time.
Yeah. So you technically had to break curfew to get there. So what do? You know, do you sit on your hands and not turn up to the appointment they say you have to turn up to?
Yeah,
Or do
yeah.
you risk finding some, you know, like a policeman who's going, what are you doing here? And oh, you broke a curfew, and doesn't listen past the first
Yeah,
sentence.
yeah. And that
Um,
they're the nuances that I'm getting at. There's like the person that wanted to house this guy wholeheartedly invested, and it could have been really a good experience for everybody. But that guy that was released, he was just like, oh shit, if I don't get home by this time. So he's just living in constant fear. Trauma, trauma, trauma. How does that allow people to, you know, move away from those systems?
and you're genuinely on your own. Like, you know, I mean, I have a bad day at work. I'll come home and I'll go, oh, geez, I need a gin and tonic, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But these people aren't allowed to have a bad day because whatever it is that they, you know, whether it's, you know, I mean, let's just face it, most of the jail population are there because of drugs, you know. So their gin and tonic might be an addiction or a habit. And of course, when they come out, it's like stay away from the gear. But you don't need, I totally empathize with you. You don't need to have too many bad days. And it's there, and there's someone texting you going, hey, mate, we're down in the park, you know, and that constant voice is there. And you're going, no, I won't, no, I won't. You know, you don't have to have too many bad days to go,
Well,
fuck it.
especially if
So,
every
you know,
day
you
you're
go,
living in fear. Like if every day you're living in fear, if I'm walking like the last 300 meters to my house or where I'm living, and if the police could come past and just stop me, and if they stop me, I've breached my parole. So technically, I should be going back to jail. Like, so
yeah.
if that's happening every day, like that's it's not a way to live, is it?
Yeah, and I don't want to characterize, you know, the police and corrections as being the bad guys.
No, no, I'm
It
just it's a
comes down to
system thing,
understanding, but
definitely.
it's yeah, it's a tricky situation. I mean, one of the other guys we had was in leafy Lower North Shore suburb,
Yeah,
and then there was a notice put in that the police. I can't remember what it's called. You know what it is, Dean? Where it's like a notice that we're watching you in effect, like you're on a list of people
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
basically it's like a, you know, watch your step. And he seemed to be doing fine. And then without warning, the police raided the house in Waverton.
yeah. Okay.
And they don't need cause, you know. And
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
I'm
he's technically
imagining
still in jail. You're serving the sentence in community.
correct.
Yeah,
You're under a corrections order.
yeah, yeah.
I imagine the rationale is, yeah, if we're visibility, we'll keep this guy, you know, that's like a warning of being
Risk,
watched.
sure, risk.
But I saw firsthand the emotional reaction to that, you know, the affront of it.
Yeah,
And this guy, like you're saying, you're trying, you're trying, you're trying. And then just that, like, you know, they've just, I'm doing fine. And they've come and they've turned my room upside down. And
yeah, yeah.
he was mostly embarrassed for his host. You know, he said,
Oh, for sure.
why would you want me here now? Because you're in a beautiful street with beautiful neighbors and a
Yeah,
leafy, low North Shore affluent suburb. And now the police have raided you. I'll go now, you know. And Louise, the host, she said, just shut up, sit down, take a deep breath.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just a bump, you know. So it just feels as though it's not, it feels as though, let's put it another way, they're building more jails. So what does that tell you?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the problem is
And
not going away.
so in essence, crime has never been at its lowest rate in Australia since the 1970s, and we sort of been measuring it, it's been
Mm.
on a slow decline. Apart from sort of murder and those sorts of things, they remain stagnant, like the same. But crime, as we know it, has been on a slow decline. We can't sort of not. I think we're coming back after COVID to starting to build more jails, which is really scary. But I think I think what the show showed is there is an appetite for people willing to give people help and opportunities, understanding how to do that and how to do it better systemically, because the individual, there's no room for error, is there? So the individual
No,
getting released, there's no room for error.
no, and this, and it's look, my attitude towards documentary goes right back to the first one I made, which is in a war zone in Somalia during a famine. Like I got caught up in the whole sort of Band-Aid, Live Aid, like
Yeah,
change the world by helping people one at a time. And one of the questions I asked one of the nurses at the front line was, how do you look at that massive problem of starvation? And why aren't you just rolling in a corner going, I can't possibly do anything? And she said, I don't see all those people. I see one person, that kid at the front, and I move in and I help that kid. And when I've done something for that kid, there's an old woman there. I help that person.
yeah,
So it's just kind of one at a time approach. And I see that in this area as well now, which is, you know, people at home, the mums and dads and the people that vote and pay taxes, they look at what they regard as the enormity of the problem and they go, oh, it's just, too hard.
yeah,
And it's a sort of out of mind, out of sight. But those at the front line, the compassion that they show for individuals as part of the overall picture, that's what drives me in documentary, to try to individualize the problem, and that's what we did with that series. But I have to say, the program was well received, got great reviews. It was put up for awards around the world, but the tune-in audience wasn't very large. It wasn't,
yeah,
and I was, over time that audience grows because it sits on a
yeah,
platform. But I still think, even though we personalized the problem and we had people that you could really empathize with who were going through this, that I'd hope people at home would go, yeah, there's more to this than just you're a bad person, they want to see you again.
yeah,
There's more nuance to it, and there's more authenticity to those who want to make it start. I felt disappointed that we couldn't catch fire a bit more and spark a noisier conversation overnight.
yeah.
But maybe that's just my documentary ego. But I thought that that program is worthy of a national audience again and again, and for school, because it should inform policy. I'm not
Yeah,
saying ours is the right way. It just showed that there are other things you can do other than what we've been doing, for the last 250 years.
and that's sort of where I sit around my advocacy at the moment, is we need a myriad of pathways. Like what works for me
Mm.
probably wouldn't work for you. However,
Yeah.
what does work for me will work for a few other people, and what works for you will work for a few other people. So the more pathways that we can get out by removing the barriers that people face when released, so the housing, the employment, the stigmas, and all those sorts of things that come with it, that's sort of where my advocacy sits now, around how can we start to do that. And I think that the program and the documentary that you did provides a solution, or sort of a look into a myriad of solutions. Yeah.
It just shows that you move one piece, and it would be arrogant of me to say we've solved it, but it just shows that you can move one piece or two pieces, and it might be worth having a look at something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got the ear of Canberra. I know you're down there, talking to the big end of politics, from time to time. What's their view? Are they throwing their
There's
hands up?
appetite. There's appetite in the marketplace at the moment. There's a lot of appetite for lived experience, and I'm concerned at the moment with social enterprise. We're just going to turn it into, so like there's a lot of large faith-based organizations that get the pool of the money at the moment. And essentially, my opinion is that they just park a lot of people and then send them back. So it's part of, like, they're all part, like whatever's happening at the moment is part of the problem. So to build something new, like we need to do different things. And this was a different thing. You tried a different thing. So what are we going to do differently? And how can we do those things differently to get purchase and to get different outcomes? Because at the moment, prison seems to be that one size fucks all approach or fits all approach, fails all approach. I've sort of landed on one size fails all approach at the moment, which I just don't, yeah, I don't know. There's definite appetite for change and change in policing. I done a round table with the federal police not too long ago, and well, probably a year ago now, but definite appetite to look at things differently. So yeah, I'm hoping
It starts with language, doesn't it? Like, I mean, you look at, when you see the politicians go to the polls, we're talking about crime and punishment, we talk about justice, we talk about law and order, and all these things define like almost a subclass, because you're either lawful or you're
yeah.
out, rather than looking at it in slightly different ways.
So yeah, what I've learned over the time is we have a punitive approach. So society works really well with our brain, our amygdala. So we're fear, like we look around for fear. That's how, from like prehistoric stuff. So what happens is, that rhetoric of war on drugs, tough on crime, that feeds our amygdala around, that turns that on. And so prison's going to make me feel safe, because what's going to happen is the people that do wrong and might hurt me, they go to jail, and that will look after that. So out of sight, out of mind sort of scenario. Yeah. So how can we change that conversation? And there seems to be, and I'm saying it's an innovative evolution at the moment with technology and kids having access to more information than they ever have. So learning these things and starting to go, oh, wait a minute, what we're doing is getting this. Do we continue to want to have that? So having those conversations, is this what we want? And how can we, in the Netherlands, they have, so I went there to do a fellowship, and they have I was like, oh, how are you closing all these prisons? And they're like, oh, what's your policy? They're like, we haven't got a policy. I was like, well, what happened here? And they're like, oh, about 10, 12 years ago, we decided to treat people humanely. And that led to the closure of prisons.
Yeah.
So how can we make humane practices into these spaces, into traumatic environments, to increase capacity, hope, joy, all of these sort of things? So, because with the punitive approach, it's all risk averse. Everyone's worried about the damage. And like, if you think that I'm that dangerous, don't let me out. Like if I'm that much of a danger, like the conversation I think we should have when people are released is, what can you contribute? How can you contribute it? And how can we help you contribute? How can we help improve the community and give you access to those things? And in the Netherlands, I interviewed a guy not too long ago, and in the Netherlands, that was an innovative way to do things. They were letting like people that have been in and out of prison 15, 20 times write their own release programs and then giving access to that. All of a sudden, they're not coming back.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, we learn a lot from that. We're dominated by American media, and of course this negative sort of this adversarial approach to politics and change is going to be around for a while, because it's easy politics, right? What do you stand for? It doesn't matter. I hate that, And unfortunately, both sides buy into it. It was happening here for a long time. It was it's not what you stand for and what your vision is, because that'll get shot down. Just knock down the other guy, the other side, and nothing good comes from that. And you need a government with some wherewithal and that sort of research, which they all have. They all have that information. And they need to be backed by. I mean, the media is not supposed to take sides, but they do. The shock jocks love the shock and awe.
Sensational journalism. I can't even say that word, but the sensational journalism. You're around like how could what bleeds leads, all that sort of. But I don't know. I'm hard. Like they're doing pill testing and drug testing in Queensland. Like, wow, that's like they're still locking up 10-year-old kids. Don't get me wrong, but like how do we, and like they decriminalize a lot of like smaller quantities in Canberra, like that's gonna like not drag people into the justice system, if you will, you know what I mean? So these are slow steps in the right direction, I believe.
I mean, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I think that there's one thing that we don't do in the West enough is heed the elders. You look at any other traditional society. I've done a lot of stuff with traditional tribes of Africa and other places, and everywhere other than in a democracy, you listen to the elders, and there's a lot of mentoring there, and I saw how you, not that you're an elder, but I saw how you spoke to that kid. Years ago, we did another series, and we followed a group of inmates from Long Bay who went to the Redfern gym,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they trained with the police, and they're all there. They were all, some of
yeah,
them were
yeah,
from the 2009 riots, when they were overturning cars. And it was the police, and it was tribal warrior, and there was the inmates. But it was for the kids at risk, it was for the
yeah,
ones who weren't in jail yet, but were like just the naughty boys, right?
yeah, yeah.
And they're all training together, but also that's where you're getting that mentoring and the brother,
It's
don't
humanity,
do what I've done,
community.
more
It's
of that,
community. And I think that's, I've always said a community problem requires a community solution. So, I think and believe in that. But knowing we're coming to the end of our time, something that I always ask people is what and how do you bring joy into your life that can then, if you're doing joyful things and happy and all that, so that ripples out instead of the other way. So what brings
Yeah.
you joy and where do you connect with joy in your life?
Um,
Anything.
I'm just a lucky guy, and also deeply superstitious. Like
Yeah.
my dad lived to 101. My mother turns 100 next week, so everyone's going, "Oh, you got good genes. You live to 100." No,
Yeah.
I'll get run over by an old folks bus coming back from a day trip,
Full of
tomorrow.
100-year-olds.
So irony drives the world. So I think because of, I don't know why I'm like that, but because of that, I don't curse the bad. Like, if I miss the bus, I don't go, I missed the bus. If I
Yeah.
get the bus, I go, that was lucky. So I try to sort of drink up the good things that happen, whether it's a nice meal, whether it's my dogs. So in terms of actually where I derive joy, I mean, it's all around me, sport, you know, um, film and music, great kids. I got grandkids, as I said earlier. Grandkids just make me laugh.
Yeah.
It's just all comes from love, doesn't it? And so I'm lucky because I've had good things happen to me. Maybe you make your luck in some ways, and also in a career sense, I've always been a storyteller. I've always liked writing, and a lot of people sort of go through uni and then they go, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just always knew, it was always going to be something to do with writing and real
Yeah.
people, real stories. So yeah, I'm the boring one in that regard. It hasn't been a journey to find redemption. I probably get away with a lot more than other people do because of that. But I just I don't have a bleak view of the world, even though the world is full of bleak things happening, and it would be easy to go, And I did draw a lot of inspiration. My first job in TV was on a music show, and when in 1984, when these long-haired, washed-up
Yeah.
rock stars put their hand up and said, "Well, the politicians aren't doing anything. We can," and they just hopped on a phone, and then from that Band Aid happened, then Live Aid. That was a light going on for me. That was like, yeah, people power, and it starts with conversations, and that idea of I can't do anything. Um, I don't believe in that. And I guess my dad was a visionary, and my mum was just a great humanitarian. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, I'll be watching out for that bus full of old folks laughing their heads off as they come back from the footy.
It's nice.
How
I
about
think
you?
what I
What brings
heard,
you joy?
what I heard from you then is like I really connected with it. I try to just connect to the moment.
Yeah.
I always say to like, and it pisses my kids off in no end. What's the time? Time of your life. It's the time of your life.
Yes.
Irrelevant of what the time is, it's the time of your life. I used to, my ex, everyone that I say it to, it really pisses off. But I wholeheartedly believe that. Like, if you're not, reality only exists in this moment.
Yeah. Well, you
Everything else
can't.
is a figment of my imagination. Like, I'll remember something how I like to remember it, or
Yeah.
it's about something how I want it to be. But right here in this moment, connecting with you, like that brings me joy as well. Nature,
Yeah. I mean,
the ocean, stuff like that.
I remember we had breakfast up at Maroubra, and we had
Yeah, yeah,
the smashed avocado. Oh, smashed avocado with bacon and halloumi, and had like had a scallop
yeah,
on
yeah,
top. At that moment, You know, that was a good
Still
moment.
remembering it. Like, and that's
Yeah.
what happens, I believe, when you enjoy and live in those moments. It's like, oh yeah, I can remember that. Like I can almost taste it. I can see it.
Yeah. And you know what? You can't, I mean, you can reflect on the past and you can remember things, but you can't change the past. You know, as a
Yeah.
wise man once told me, you can't put the poo back in the horse. So, you know, you can think about the past. So you got now and what you're doing today and what you're doing next week. And, you
Yeah.
know, just do, I mean, just do the best you can, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you very much, Ben, for your time. Really appreciate it. As always, it's a pleasure catching up with you. Is there
My
anything
pleasure as
you want to
well.
spruik or sell or like before you go?
No, only smashed avocado at the what was the name of that cafe? Is it the pool? I think it was called.
Is it the
North
Rockpool
Marina.
Cafe? We'll give them a shout.
Yeah,
Was it the Rockpool? Rockpool
it
near
was.
Mahan
It
Pool
was
at
rock pool.
Maroubra. Go down and get a smashed avo there. Delicious. Can't recommend it highly. Thanks
All right,
again.
mate. All the
Really
best.
appreciate your time.